Today we are talking about the 5 best books I have ever taught. I feel like I'm doing weird things with my face. It's the 5 best books I've ever, now I'm angry. We're talking about the 5 best books I've ever taught. If you're new here, you might be wondering, who am I? Who are you to teach books? My name is Dr. Andrew Moore. I'm professor of great books at St. Thomas University, and I teach great books. That is what I do. That is how I spend most of my time, a lot of my time, just discussing the greatest things that have ever been written with people, mostly young people, but also older people. All are welcome. So I've compiled this short list of the things that I think are the best things that I teach. Now, a couple of notes, 2 notes, I think. One is that I'm only talking about works of literature. Okay. I teach in a great books program. So I teach a lot of philosophy too. Maybe I'll do another video about that. If you want another video on like the 5 best philosophy books I teach, let me know. Let me know in the comments. I can do that. But I thought to make it kind of simple, so we're comparing apples to apples. We'll stick with literature for this video. So 5 works of literature. Now the second thing is this. I'm ranking them based on how much I enjoy teaching them. They're 5 books that in my experience as a professor of great books are just home runs every time I teach them, that I get something out of them. The students seem to respond to them, that they generate great discussions and great questions in the classroom. They are about really important and fundamental ideas that we ought to think about and talk about. That's how we're evaluating these. So without further ado, here's the 5 best books I've ever taught. So we're going to begin. Number 1 on the list is King Lear by William Shakespeare. Now this could be a controversial choice. I'm a big Shakespeare guy. Shakespeare's my guy, really. Lear, I go back and forth on this. I think Lear, there's a time in my life when I would have said Lear is his greatest play. Lear is the greatest work by William Shakespeare. Other times I think it's Hamlet. Hamlet is probably the one that most people would say this is his greatest play. There's a couple of others. People like Twelfth Night. People have their favorites. The plot of this play is about an aging king. He's an elderly king, and he knows he doesn't have much time left. And the problem is he lives in a hereditary monarchy and he's got no sons. So there's no one who is going to inherit his throne. Instead, he's got 3 daughters, and patriarchy. None of them's allowed to inherit the throne. So he's got this problem where he's got to figure out what to do because he's got no heir, and he's worried that once he dies, there's going to be a civil war. So he's trying to navigate, tries to kind of divide up the country between his daughters, and he'll still stay in charge, but he'll kind of make them in charge. It's actually, if you've seen Succession is based on King Lear. This is the whole idea of Succession. But the existential philosophical problem here is what you have is this old guy who's about to die, and he's trying to overreach. He's trying to sort of exert control over the world from beyond the grave before he's died. It's this very, very weird thing where he's trying to predetermine what will happen after he dies. And that's not up to him. The thing about Lear that makes it special is its scope. Lear is kind of cosmic. It's like about the universe. I often think that Hamlet is a play that zooms in on the human psyche, what's going on inside your brain. That's sort of what Hamlet is about. Lear is what's going on in the universe? What is up with this universe? And its fundamental question, I think, that it asks us is the universe moral? Is there a kind of moral government in the universe? We see lots of people do lots of bad things in King Lear, and it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy, right? So bad things happen, innocent people die. It's a very, very sad play. And I do think this play, it's not hopeless in this play. There are moments that I find profoundly moving, really moving in this play. There's one, for example, in the middle of the play, there's this bad guy named the Duke of Cornwall, and he's torturing this other guy, Gloucester. He's taking his eyes out, gouging out his eyes. Horrible. And what happens is this servant, this nameless guy, stands up and he says to the Duke of Cornwall, I can't let you do this. I'm not going to let you do this. But the servant dies. The servant dies. And I always think when I read this scene with the servant that there's like a moral lesson here. Like, we've got to do the right thing, even if we're probably going to fail. And so you do that thing, not because there's like a probability that you can predict that you're going to win. You do that thing because it's the right thing to do, even if it's a doomed enterprise. Okay, second book on the list, it's a poem about how people will inevitably do the wrong thing. That is Paradise Lost by John Milton. This is one of the greatest works of literature in the English language. This is an epic poem written by John Milton in the 17th century. And it's about this poem is a rewriting of the Garden of Eden story, right? And more than that, it's about Satan, Lucifer's rebellion against God, his fall from heaven. It's about the war in heaven between the rebel angels and the loyal angels. And then at the center of it is God creating Adam and Eve and them succumbing to temptation and eating the forbidden fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They're tempted by Satan. They eat the fruit. They doom humanity to a mortal life filled with suffering. Thanks, guys. Thanks. Paradise Lost, I'll say this. As a teacher, this one's a tall order. It's long. It's a long poem. It's probably one of the most difficult things I ask my students to read. But what's amazing about it, I've taught this poem over and over again. I don't know how many times, 10 different times. I don't know. What's amazing about it is that every time I've taught it, it hits. It generates dynamic conversations in the classroom. This poem has a way of polarizing and kind of energizing students that they become very invested in characters and parts of the story. And I never read it when everybody's on the same side. That never happens when studying this poem, which is what makes it so amazing to teach. You don't want something where everybody falls in line and everybody agrees and everybody has the same reading or the same take. This poem is about free will. It's about morality and psychology. It's about the moral consequences of freedom. If you are free, what then are your responsibilities? What are you accountable for? And to be free, does that mean you are completely free? Or is human freedom circumscribed or limited in some way? And how and by what? Part of the reason I think this poem is so much fun to talk about is because it's hard to figure out John Milton's intentions, even though he is very explicit about them. Like he says right at the beginning of the poem, I'm writing this to justify the ways of God to man. He's going to explain to us why God is good in a universe where there is human suffering and lots of bad things happen. And I think immediately as readers of the poem, as students, we think, wait a second. If God is wholly good, if God is totally good, why do his actions need to be justified? Why does he need to explain himself? Like if God is perfect, completely good, then shouldn't his goodness be like obvious to me? And so then we might say, well, wait, if I don't recognize God's goodness, maybe that's a me problem, not a God problem. Maybe I'm a flawed being as a human being. Maybe we're all flawed. Then of course the question becomes, well, wait, if I'm created by a God who's perfect and I'm flawed, I have some deficiency. Why would God make me like that? Like what are my deficiencies? Does that suggest some deficiency or imperfection in God? And this is the kind of fascinating problem that the poem takes up. So especially if you're like theologically inclined, it's an incredible work of literature. The number 3 book on the list is Beloved by Toni Morrison. This is, I think, the greatest novel ever written. I haven't read all the novels, so I can't say for sure, but in my professional opinion, I think it's the best novel I've ever read. Now, I mean, in some ways, here I could certainly say I think it's the greatest American novel. Maybe the greatest novel ever written in English. Like that's, like the Russian novels are like, they're kind of almost like different animals, right? It's like a different beast. So it's like not exactly an apples to apples comparison. But look, I think it's the greatest American novel for sure. And part of that, I think, is just because of the power and the beauty of Morrison's prose. I think that's a big part of it. But I also think it has to do with subject matter. Like, this novel speaks to, addresses, like, the original sin of the United States of America. This is a novel about slavery. Its protagonist is Sethe. She is this woman who escaped slavery with her family. And the terrible thing we find out early in this novel is that Sethe and her family were almost kidnapped, were almost taken back into the South, back into slavery. And in order to spare her children from that horrible fate, Sethe kills one of them, tries to kill them all, but succeeds in one case. And so this novel is really about this monumental question. Like, what do we do? How do we live in the face of past crimes, past traumas? And it's both a personal question, and what makes this novel so genius, it's also a political question, right? This is not just a question about Sethe, that Sethe has done this terrible thing, and how does she live with it? How can she atone for this terrible thing she's done? This is also, of course, a historical question, a national question about how does a country like the United States of America come to grips with this world historical crime that it has committed, that exists at its very foundations. And one of the reasons I rank it as one of the best books that I teach is that it brings to the forefront this extremely urgent and important question. Like, this is a question that in the West anyway, we are still grappling with. Like, what is the legacy of colonialism, the legacy of institutions like slavery, and how, as societies, as nations, as countries, how do we move forward when we are haunted by these terrible crimes? And clearly, like, we have still not worked through that. We've still not figured that out. And so that's what makes Morrison's book still so valuable to us today. Okay, number 4. I don't know if these are ranked. They're not ranked. This is just random. But the fourth book on the list that I will talk to you about is Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. Fun Home is a graphic novel. I was turned on to this, I don't know, maybe close to 10 years ago now, I think by a colleague. And I have taught it almost every year since. I teach this book annually. We have this course. It's like a second-year course called Quest for the Good Life, where we read a bunch of books about what it is to live a good human life, and Fun Home is a fixture on the syllabus for that course. I always say this. I note this, like, when I start teaching the text. It's a graphic novel, but in some ways it's not actually a novel. It's an autobiography, really. Bechdel is writing the story of her own life. Essentially, it's a book about a young gay woman growing up and coming to terms with her sexuality. It's a coming of age story. And it's also about this very difficult relationship that she had with her now deceased father. And she's thinking through who she is and who he was, and how she is like him and not like him, and how she reinterprets memories now in the aftermath after he has died. The appeal of this text as a teaching text has to do with its being a graphic novel, because we get to do this really interesting exercise where we are working through not only the words in the text, but also the images and how those two things play against each other or alongside each other. Bechdel's pages, her images they're like deceptively simple. It's a very kind of cartoonish style, but the pages, the images are loaded with allusions and references. This is a very literate book. It's intertextual. So Bechdel is also using, like, her dad is a big reader, and her dad taught English in high school. So part of their relationship was negotiated through texts and through literature, books they traded back and forth. And so Bechdel is interpreting her life and interpreting her father's life, her family's life through these other narratives that she has grown up reading. It's one thing I like about it. It's extremely accessible. Some students have never read graphic novels before. Some students love graphic novels. It doesn't really matter what your background is. You can access this text really, really easily. It's a relatively quick read. but it's also very dense. Like one of the things I really appreciate about it, it is obviously a work of genius. Like the more times I've gone back to this text, every time I go back to this text, I discover something new. There's another layer. There's another reference. There's something new to be found every time I study it. Did someone knock? Yeah, come in. Oh, okay.
I'm stealing your chair while you're gone. Ah.
All right. Last but not least, certainly not least, Homer's Iliad. This is the oldest book on the list by far. This is Homer's ancient epic poem about the Trojan War. And I love this book. I find reading the Iliad, for me, I don't want to be weird, but it's almost like a religious experience. Like I find this poem more than almost any other work of literature. It takes me to the extreme limits of the human experience. So the story, this is like, if you love mythology or you've always wanted to like know more about the Greek gods, this is a great, I want to say it's a great place to start. Again, it's a hefty block of paper. When I teach this, I teach this to first year students as a kind of introductory text. And it is a way into both that kind of worldview, that ancient worldview, this polytheistic universe, understanding, the nature of fate for the ancient world, what that all means. The Trojan War, as you maybe know, is fought over Helen of Troy, who is reputedly the most beautiful woman in the world. She is taken by this Trojan prince named Paris back to Troy from Sparta. Problem is she was married to the king of Sparta, and so he rounds up all of his friends, his fellow kings from Greece, and all the Greeks sail to Troy to wage war to get Helen back. And so these heroes who go to get her back, this includes Achilles and Odysseus and Agamemnon, Menelaus, a lot of these characters that you may have heard of from Greek mythology or from other stories. And in some ways that main plot is really just the background, like what's going on in the background, because the sort of primary problem in the Iliad takes place at the end of the war, in like the 9th year of this 10-year war, or begins in the 9th year of the war. And really the central figure is Achilles, who decides he's done with fighting and he's disrespected by Agamemnon. They have this whole argument and he decides he's going to quit. He's going to quit. He's going to go home, and he's the greatest Greek warrior. And so, it's like losing LeBron James or Patrick Mahomes or something. Like all of a sudden you've lost your star player. And then while Achilles is out of the battle, Hector, who's the greatest Trojan hero, he like runs amok on the battlefield, and the Trojans are winning until Hector kills Patroclus, who is Achilles' beloved, his lover. He kills him, and then Achilles comes back filled with rage and grief. So that's all going on. That's like the main storyline in a way. But one of the things that I find so fascinating about teaching this poem is when we get the opening, like the idea, like the cause of the war. You've got like thousands of people fighting and dying over this one beautiful woman. Most people find that preposterous, right? Students are like, "What? This is a dumb story. Why would no one would do this?" But what's amazing is that the characters in the poem say the same thing. We get characters in the poem say, "Wait a second. Why are we fighting this war? What's the point of this? Why are we here?" And these questions, you sort of realize, like, wait a second. There is something deeply true about human beings and human conflict here. Like humans, when you look at a lot of wars, like we get involved in stupid conflicts all the time for stupid reasons, like the egos of particular world leaders or whatever, some perceived slight. And there's a lot of human suffering because of these conflicts, and they're often very hard to get out of once you're in them. And that, in a way, is what this poem is about. But it's also this deep meditation on the purpose of life. Like, why do you do anything if you know you're going to die? What's worth doing? What's worth dying for? These are the questions. This is the stuff I want to talk about, and what I find, this poem is as good as anything at getting at those questions. So those are the best 5 books I've ever taught. I want to say thank you to my patrons on Patreon. I appreciate your support. If you want to hear me talk about more books, there's a video up here where I do that. You can click on that link and I will see you there, and I'll talk to you soon.